On March 20th, villagers in Leiming Town, Dung County, Hainan, clashed with government enforcement officers while trying to protect their betel nut gardens. The local authorities justified the action by stating that the villagers were growing betel nuts on essential farmland and used excavators to forcibly remove the trees that had been carefully cultivated by the farmers. Videos show villagers throwing wastewater at the enforcement officers, causing them to retreat. Betel nut chewing offers stimulant and narcotic effects and is a widespread practice in southern China. The betel nut trees are a crucial source of income for the farmers. It takes 5 to 10 years for a betel nut tree to bear fruit, and once mature, it can continue to produce for 30 to 50 years. However, these trees were destroyed in a single night. The villagers, unable to bear the loss, took action in protest. The footage showed one betel nut tree after another being felled, shattering the farmers' hopes built over more than a decade. The Leiming Town government issued a statement afterward calling this a special rectification of non-food use of permanent basic farmland. It claimed that only recently planted betel nut trees were being cleared and accused the villagers of disrupting work order with extreme actions due to emotional agitation. However, the statement avoided addressing the farmers' losses and demands. It was reported that on March 20th alone, at least 7 incidents of authorities forcibly removing betel nut trees occurred in cities such as Sanya, Haikou, and Ledong. Betel nut trees in Hainan, once considered a money tree for farmers, have now become a focal point of tension between the authorities and the public. On one side, there is the government's clearing action. On the other, farmers face the despair and anger of having their trees destroyed. According to Chinese media reports, aside from the issue of planting betel nut on basic farmland, some betel nut growing areas in Hainan have been designated as state-owned forest land or public welfare forest areas, which the government believes harms the environment. For farmers who rely on betel nut for their livelihood, the policy shift has directly severed their economic lifeline. For example, a farmer in Chongzhou County, Li Xianmei, who held a government-issued land contract, saw over 1,000 of his betel nut trees cut down after being classified as state-owned forest land by the Forestry Bureau, without receiving any compensation. In Sanya, Mr. Gao, a villager from Nanbin Farm, had his betel nut trees destroyed. The compensation offered by the farm was much lower than the market price, and after unsuccessful negotiations, the crops were removed.
看到了海南这边的农民伯伯种了一些槟榔树，全部被挖掉了。
These past few days, I saw that the farmers in Hainan were growing some betel nut trees, but they were all dug up. It's really heartbreaking to see because it's so hard for the farmers. What did farmers used to fear? They feared invaders, wars, and traitors. But today's farmers are still the same. Now they fear having their homes destroyed after they build them, having their crops dug up, getting caught when riding electric bikes, or getting fined for not having a license when opening a store. Farmers don't have any benefits at all. This TikToker stated that betel nut prices this year are guaranteed to exceed last year's, and the reason behind it is quite heartbreaking.
These past couple of days, there's been a lot of noise about non-food conversion in places like Ding'an in Hainan. I can say with 100% certainty that betel nut prices will not be low this year. The reason is simple. Last year, it was the typhoon, which was a natural disaster, but this year, it's a man-made disaster. Whether it's non-food conversion or returning forests to farmland, it's all done in the name of policy, but in reality, it's cutting off people's livelihoods. You always say that farmers don't cooperate, but let me do the maths for you. A pound of grain costs 1 yuan, which you can't even sell for the price of a bottle of mineral water. But a pound of betel nut can easily go for 30 or 50 yuan. If it were you, which one would you choose? Everyone hopes that betel nut prices will be high this year, but no one wants it to happen at the expense of the farmers.
A Chinese TikToker expressed sympathy for the farmers in Hainan who lost their betel nut trees. Do you know how people in Hainan make a living? Hainan doesn't have manufacturing, high-tech industries, or even much of a service industry. It's a province with very few job opportunities and wages are low, only 2 to 3,000 yuan, and it's hard to find work. More than 95% of people rely on farming to live. They can't find jobs. So when people say Hainan isn't suitable for farming, it's because growing food doesn't make any money. They can't even afford the fertilizers. The TikToker questioned the purpose of protecting farmland, asking whether it was to solve national food issues, but pointed out that the interests of Hainan and its farmers were being ignored. He asked, if you destroy their trees, how can they feed their families? The betel nut tree incident, which led to the feces water protest, appeared to be a confrontation between farmers and enforcement officers. In reality, it was an outburst against the long-standing pressures of CCP policies. Hainan is just the beginning, and similar frustrations are spreading across rural China. In fact, the CCP's policies have been inconsistent. The current policy is returning forests to farmland or green for grain. But in 1999, the CCP introduced grain for green in the name of ecological protection, aiming to address issues like soil erosion, floods, and droughts. At that time, farmers responded by giving up low-efficiency farmland to plant trees. Over 20 years later, tree planting has had little effect. Floods continue to occur, and Beijing still faces large-scale sandstorms, raising doubts about the effectiveness of the original policy. In 2022, the CCP issued a document suspending new tasks for grain for green, effectively shifting to green for grain. In 2023, the CCP further promoted green for grain. Over 200 civil servants in Hainan personally participated, uprooting entire forests and filling in ponds to grow crops. In Chengdu, Sichuan, an eco-friendly green belt built at a cost of 34 billion yuan was cleared, with 17,000 acres of forest land being turned into barren land. Social media users criticized it as a waste of public funds. State media defended these actions, calling it reform for recultivation rather than green for grain, but the public remained skeptical, believing it was just a name change to continue disrupting the status quo. In 2023, another controversial issue arose with the so-called rice planting in the mountains. Zhu Youyong, a member of the Chinese Academy of Engineering, claimed to have introduced dry rice planting on 82,000 acres of hilly land in Yunnan, with yields of 126 kilograms per acre. The rice planting in the mountains method involved clearing vegetation from steep hillsides to create bare terraced fields or directly digging embankments into the slopes to plant rice. However, German water expert Wang Weiluo pointed out that the official promoted success cases were small-scale experimental fields, maintained with significant investment in labor and resources. When accounting for true costs, the method is inefficient and not feasible for large-scale promotion. Ironically, as the rainy season begins in April and May, dry rice planted on barren hillsides without proper soil conservation is easily washed away by heavy rain, causing immense hardship for farmers. Videos of these disasters have been widely circulated online. A TikToker mocked CCP officials for their inconsistent policies over the years. Things are unpredictable. On one side, they are forcing the people to return forests to farmland, bulldozing farmers' orchards, fish ponds, medicinal fields, and forests, all without any discussion. They say it's to restore farmland. On the other side, they're filling up the good farmland to make it into industrial or commercial land, even building on areas that aren't suitable for buildings, sinking deep piles just to build high-rises. They're taking land that's not suitable for crops and turning it into mountain rice fields. Farmers' crops, which they could immediately cash in, are being destroyed just because of an empty piece of paper. Officials, have your consciousnesses really been eaten by the experts? Can't you feel any pain when you see these scenes? On October 20th, 2024, villagers from a betel nut farm in Hainan protested the government's forced land requisition. The villagers questioned, "Do you know this is illegal? Why are you still doing it?" The enforcement officers on site shouted at the people filming. Filming won't solve the problem. Then a group of enforcement officers surrounded and pushed the person filming. The officers' actions prompted villagers to angrily shout, "Why don't you let people film? What are you trying to hide? From 2022 to 2023, in line with the authorities' Green for Grain policy, CCP agricultural management teams were sent to rural areas. They not only conducted major inspections of the so-called illegal equipment and required driving licenses, but also confiscated pigs from farmers. They even demanded rural areas begin paying property fees, with villagers describing them as village bullies, which fueled public anger. According to numerous videos exposed online, these agricultural management teams, under the guise of enforcement, violently demolished farmers' vegetable greenhouses and even seized chickens and ducks. A vlogger summarized what they believe should be 5 don'ts for the Green for Grain policy. No sudden notifications, no one-size-fits-all approach, no ignoring farmers' wishes, no unlicensed land clearing, and no reckless reclamation. The vlogger added that any actions without compensation violate national policy. Right now, many rural areas are increasing their land area to meet the targets given by the higher-ups, pushing forward large-scale Green for Grain projects. But most farmers haven't received any compensation. If farmers want compensation, the officials will just say that the national policy doesn't provide for compensation. They use policy to exploit the people. Let me tell you, this is all a lie. The government has clear regulations stating that if compensation isn't given, it's illegal. Whether it's a central or local document, compensation must be given according to local standards. However, Chinese policy expert Yue Shan pointed out that it's a mistake to believe that top-level CCP policies are good and that local governments are the ones failing. According to Yue, the CCP central government intentionally takes away the people's benefits, allowing local governments to harm the public and then blames local authorities when things go wrong. The reality is that in Hainan, local officials can decide to dig up betel nut trees, and in Sichuan, local officials can order the demolition of greenways. One TikToker questioned, quote, "If the government wants to return forests to farmland, why can't they pick the oranges before digging up the trees?" Unquote. But local governments don't consider these issues. They prioritize fulfilling the higher-ups' targets above all else. A vlogger from Guigang, Guangxi, expressed his frustration. "I've been growing star anise trees on this mountain for over 20 years, with about 11 to 13 acres. I came back from working outside, went up the mountain to take a look, and everything was destroyed. I don't know what to do." A vlogger introduced a Green for Grain case in Guangxi. "Today, I was invited by the involved party to Weiping City, Guigang, Guangxi to handle a Green for Grain case. According to the person involved, they contracted 33 acres of wasteland to plant sugar oranges in 2011 and have been managing it for 13 years. This year, they were told that the land is designated as basic farmland and that all the fruit trees need to be cut down. The compensation is very low and the person is in great distress. The CCP's Green for Grain policy not only destroys fruit trees but also sacrifices roads used by farmers for daily life, progressively shrinking their living space." A vlogger from Guangxi showed the harsh conditions in front of their home.
They are pushing the Green for Grain movement now. Has it ended where you are? It hasn't ended here yet. This is in front of my house. The officials say they want to return the land to farming, so they started clearing it, and we let them. This road is the village's main road, over 100 years old, and now it's included in the Green for Grain program. They even want to take out the road in front of my house. Is this fair?
The official reason behind pushing the Green for Grain policy is to ensure food security, claiming it will strengthen the ability to guarantee the supply of important agricultural products like food. But who will farm the land? It's no longer the farmers of the past. According to CCP policy, the goal is to create 198 million acres of high-standard farmland by 2030, with significant financial investment and encouragement for social capital to participate. The government also plans to establish 10,000 new farms. In addition to major state-owned companies like COFCO and Poly Group, which are giants in China's agriculture sector, Other state-owned enterprises like China Railway 14th Bureau and several large private companies have entered rural areas to engage in large-scale farming. Last year, China Railway 14th Bureau took on 2,400 acres of land in Shandong, claiming to develop high-standard farmland, sparking online debate. An associate professor at Huazhang Agricultural University, Zhou Zhen, revealed that some state-owned enterprises entering agriculture have no experience in farming. Running an agricultural business is challenging and often unprofitable. Some companies enter farming to collect government subsidies or to subcontract for profit, while others sell their own fertilizers and pesticides while receiving subsidies. Still, some companies use farming ventures as a way to access financing, using agriculture as a means for financial operations rather than focusing on actual farming. A vlogger pointed out that while the CCP's policies seem focused on food security, in reality they're creating more barren land. In order to meet the 296 million acres of farmland target, many places are pushing the green for grain policy vigorously. Now, there are so many empty houses in the countryside, and there's only a few old people in the village. The young people have all gone out to work, so who's going to farm the land you've created? Who's going to manage it? Are you going to rely on the old folks in the village? It's not that people don't have land to farm, it's that there's no one to farm the existing land. In the past, people planted fruit trees in forests to prevent the land from becoming barren. Now you're taking the trees out, and in a few years it'll be barren land again. I suggest you pay more attention to the current situation in the countryside. Listen to the voices of the people and stop blindly making decisions. If you clear large areas of forests to meet your targets, you'll just end up with more barren land. Do you understand this? Another vlogger added, in the past, you asked farmers to return farmland to forests, now you're asking to restore farmland. Take a look at this land. It's surrounded by mountains, and no one's farmed it for decades. Just for this one plot, they even built a 2-kilometer mountain road. What's the point of that? A Chinese scholar specializing in field research highlighted that the green for grain policy is resulting in land that can be farmed. What was this barren land used for before? It was used to grow fruit trees. This was once basic farmland, but many years ago fruit trees were planted here. Now, this place is still considered basic farmland, so the fruit trees are being dug up as part of the green for grain policy. The forest has been cleared and the farmland has been restored, but what's left? It's just weeds now. Of course, we need to ensure food security and meet the 196 million farmland target, but if you turn forests to farmland and can't farm it, what are we supposed to do? A scholar, He Haibo from Hebei, published an article in Chinese media stating that the green for grain policy across different regions is playing out like a magical reality show. He explained that, based on his field research, authorities are forcing farmers to clear barren land, which not only goes against common sense but also prohibits farmers from planting more profitable crops. Instead, they are being forced to switch to less profitable grain production, which contradicts basic economic logic. Furthermore, young farmers who have become accustomed to urban life are being forced back to rural areas to farm, which also goes against the practical realities of their lives. Independent commentator Du Zheng stated that the CCP's focus on food security is a facade. Farmers are treated as pawns with subsidies as bait, while state-owned enterprises and local officials share the profit. The only ones suffering are the farmers. Hong Kong commentator Liu Ruixiao criticized the green for grain policy as contradictory to the CCP's long-promoted urbanization policy. He warned that it will create more problems, relying heavily on subsidies to prop up the policy. The CCP controls both money and power, and with no money, it can use policies to seize wealth. Professor Chiu Wanjun in the Department of Finance and Economics at Northeastern University in Boston criticized the CCP's approach as treating the symptoms rather than the cause. He pointed out that the original grain for green policy was based on factors like land infertility, poor planting efficiency, and pollution. Now, the CCP is using political power to force farmland restoration with uncertain outcomes. Political scholar Wang Xinxian noted that under economic slowdown and increasing anxiety over international affairs, the CCP is acting recklessly.